Hi everybody, I'm Pia from Stitches and Scraps, and this is lesson 4 of Learn to Crochet. Today we're going to work on the double crochet stitch. In our previous lessons, we made a foundation chain and then we worked 2 rows of single crochet. So now we're going to work a row of double crochet. There are lots of different ways to start a row of double crochet. I'm going to start with showing you the most common way, and then I'll show you some of the variations after we do this row. So the most common way to start is going to be to turn your work so that we can start our new row and chain 3. So 1, 2, 3. And if you remember how to make the chain, let me rip those out and do it a little bit slower for you. Turn. And if you remember how to make a chain, you yarn over and you pull that through the loop that's on your hook. So that was a 1 chain, chain 2, and chain 3. Okay, it's just like when we made our foundation chains, but it's not a foundation. Now it's going to be the side, and it's raised us up to a little bit more than double the size of a single crochet. And that's where we want to be. So now let's start our first double crochet stitch. Well, because this chain is so big, if we were to do a double crochet, and I know I'm not showing you how, but if we were to do a double crochet right here, do you see how puffy that becomes and this kind of sticks out? We don't want that look. So we're going to count this chain 3 because it's so big. We're going to count that as our first stitch. So we are not going to do a double crochet into this first stitch. We're going to go right on into the second stitch. And this is going to count as our first stitch. When we work back into it later, we're going to be working into this top chain. So this top chain actually becomes like the top of the stitch, like that. So that is our first double crochet stitch actually. See how easy that was? Now let's work an actual double crochet. When we worked a single crochet, we started by inserting our hook and pulling up a loop. Before we do that, to make it a double, we're going to do one extra step first. We're going to yarn over. And again, yarn over, just bring the yarn over the top of your hook. Okay, so yarn over. Now insert that hook into this chain, or into this stitch, and yarn over again and pull up a loop. Okay, now you can see we have 3 loops on our hook, and there might be a temptation if you're pausing here to let it go like this and stretch out so that they're all the same height. Don't do that. Keep it at so all the loops are the same size. So this loop's at the bottom and this loop's at the top, but you're kind of at an angle. Okay. Now to finish the stitch, we're going to do the same thing we did to finish our single crochet, but we're going to do it twice instead of once. We're going to yarn over and we're going to pull through 2 of the loops that are on the hook. Okay, that's what we did to do a single crochet, but we've got an extra loop because we're doing a double. So we're going to do that again. Now we've got 2 loops on the hook, we yarn over and we pull through 2 loops. This is our full double crochet. And you can see this little diagonal line here. That is characteristic of a double crochet. That's how you recognize a double crochet post, is it has one diagonal line like this. So let's do another stitch. Yarn over, insert your hook into the next stitch, and remember we're going under both of those bars there. Yarn over and pull up a loop. Yarn over and pull through 2 loops. Yarn over and pull through 2 loops. One more time. Yarn over, insert your hook, yarn over, pull up a loop. Yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So now we have 4 double crochet on our hook, and you can see with not on our hook, on our work here, on our row. You can see with double crochet that the posts are much easier to count. They're much more separated. So it's very easy to see. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches right here. Let's finish the row, and on our next stitch I'm going to show you a little bit about where all the parts of the stitch come from, because now it's a little more complicated than the single was, okay? This loop is still going to become the top of our next stitch, just like it did with a single crochet. That's actually going to be true of almost every crochet stitch. The loop that's on your hook is going to become the top of the next stitch. This yarn over is actually going to become this little middle diagonal line. And then this loop that we pull up is going to become the bottom of the stitch right here, just like it was with a single crochet. So you'll see that. We're going to yarn over and pull through both of these, okay? That one gives us the bottom of the stitch. This one gives us the little diagonal line that rests on top of it, okay? And now we've got 2 more loops. Well, this loop right here, this is the one we just pulled through, that gives us sort of this top half V. See how there's a V at the bottom, a diagonal line, and a V at the top? Well, the V at the bottom was the stitch that we pulled up from this stitch, the loop that we pulled up from this stitch. The diagonal line was the yarn over, and now this V at the top half of the stitch is going to be this loop that we pulled through the other 2 loops. So now let's finish the stitch. See how that becomes the little V at the top of the stitch? And then this one becomes the top of our stitch. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 parts to a double crochet, and then we're left with a loop on our hook. So let's go a little quickly through the row because I want to show you another alternate way to start your row when we get to the end here. So yarn over, insert your hook, yarn over, pull up a loop. Pull through 2, pull through 2. I'm going to abbreviate this a little bit. Yarn over, pull up a loop. See how I just said pull up a loop? A lot of times, and you're going to see this in patterns too, okay? A lot of times instead of saying yarn over and pull up a loop, or insert hook in next stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, what they're going to say is pull up a loop in next stitch. And that means insert it into here, yarn over and pull up a loop. That is pulling up a loop in the next stitch. So you will likely see it abbreviated that way a lot of times. Yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Again, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Yarn over, pull up a loop, through 2, through 2. Okay, we've come to the end of the row, and now let's look at this again. Remember, this little loop at the end here, that was the chain that we did to raise to the height of that single crochet row, so that's not a stitch. Our last stitch is right here, that V shape on the top. So we'll make one more stitch, yarn over, insert our hook. Oops, I went in the wrong spot. Insert our hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, pull through 2, and pull through 2. So this is one row of double crochet stitches. And you can see it's double the size of a single crochet because look at what a single crochet looks like. It's this little V stitch, or this little V shape at the bottom with a little cap on it, right? Well, that's what this is. It's a little V shape with a little cap. And then here's another little V shape with another little cap. So it's basically like 2 rows of single crochet, except the stitches are only connected at the tops. They're not connected in the middle like these 2 rows are. See, because this is 2 separate rows. So a double crochet stitch is taller, it's also floppier, and it has more gaps in between, which is good sometimes and not so good other times. So we finished one row of double crochet. Let's count our stitches. We have 1, because remember our chain counts as the first stitch. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. And so then we know we've done it right. Now I want to show you an alternate way. Do you see that this chain 3 looks a little floppy and doesn't really look quite like the other stitches, and there's a bit of a gap? There's a couple things we can do here. What we did before was we turned our work and then we chained 3, right? Well, an easy difference would be instead of turning our work first, let's chain 3 first. 1, 2, 3, and now let's turn our work. And what this does is it adds a little bit of a twist here, which just kind of cinches everything up a little bit. It's a minor change, but it makes it look a little bit neater. Another thing that people often do, not me, I don't particularly like this technique, but this is a technique I've seen quite frequently, is instead of making a chain 3, just make a chain 2. Okay? This is just getting us up to the height of the stitch, but without making the top of the stitch. Remember when we looked at our chain 3 here, these 2 chains give us the height, And this chain is actually becoming the top of our next stitch. So that's what we're going to work into when we work into our into the last stitch here. So that is actually the height, and this is the top of the stitch. Well, what if we just did the 2 chains and we didn't make the 3rd chain and we didn't count it as a stitch? Well, now it's more like what we did with the single crochet, right? We just chain up to the height we want, turn our work, okay, and then work a double crochet right into that very first stitch. And I don't like this because I think it tends to be a little bulkier, but some people really, really, really love it and swear by it. So you may see that in a couple of patterns. I'm going to work a few stitches just so you can see how that end looks at the end of it. Okay, so there's a few double crochet stitches, and that is what the end looks like. This chain 2 is not a stitch. You do not work into it when you come back. Your first stitch is here. Okay, so, or sorry, your last stitch when you come back on the end of the row is going to be here. And that leaves all this extra bulk on the side that I just don't like. So not my favorite, but definitely a popular technique. I want to work to the end of the row to show you what it looks like working into that 3rd chain, because there's a very distinct way to work into it to help not leave such a gap. Okay, I've worked 19 stitches and I have just one left, which is this chain 3 that we started with. Now, if I had started with a chain 2, like if this was the other side where I started with a chain 2 in the first stitch and was not counting it as a stitch, it would look something like this, and I would just be leaving it there. So that's why I kind of don't like it. It's just too bulky for me. But this one is the chain 3 where it does count as a stitch, so we have to work into it. And remember I told you that the top chain, see here's our 3 chains, 1, 2, 3. This top chain is going to be the top of our stitch. So that's what we want to work into. And you see the 2 loops on the top, and it's got that back bump at the back. We want to work under those 2 loops at the top. So this can be a little fiddly your first time. Don't get frustrated with it. Go under 1 loop at a time if you have to. But here's how you do it. Do your yarn over. Go under there and under there. Oops, see, even I missed it. Okay, make sure you get under just those 2 loops. All right, you should see on the other end of your hook, if I flip this around, there's that back bump on the other end of my hook. Okay, you want to go into this actual chain and finish your stitch. So just like that, you can see it's actually caught inside that chain and pulls that stitch nice and straight, so you get a straight line at the edge. What a lot of people do when they're first starting, and this is where you don't want to make this mistake, okay? A lot of people will put their first stitch or their last stitch right here in the space in between. See how there's nothing under my stitch there? It's just in that space. I didn't go under these 2 loops. I just went right in between here into this big empty hole. Well, what that does is it opens up that hole. So now we've got a much bigger hole to worry about at the end. And this stitch is not lined up. The post of this stitch is not lined up over the post of this stitch. It's actually resting in between these 2. That makes for a really ugly edge. So avoid doing that. The correct way to do it is yarn over, go under both of these 2 loops here. Okay, that's your 3rd chain. Yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. And there you have a nice neat edge. Do you guys see the difference in that? I hope you can see that this is much more lined up here the way it's supposed to be. And that is how you do the double crochet. Thank you for joining me. And next time we're going to learn how to do a stitch called the half double crochet. Which is kind of a cross between the single and the double. So I hope you'll join me for that as well.